There we are looking at number systems. First we'll see what do you mean by an additive inverse. Then we'll see a few properties of integers. These properties of integers would include closure property, commutative property, associative property, and additive identity. Then finally we'll look at multiplication of integers. What do we mean by an additive inverse? So when two integers are added together and the sum equals 0, then each number is called the additive inverse of the other. Let us understand this using an example. Say we have an integer 3. Now what can we add to this integer 3 to end up with the result 0? We need to add minus 3. So 3 would be the additive inverse of minus 3 and vice versa. Similarly, say we have 8. If we add minus 8 to 8, we would end up with 0. So minus 8 in this case would be the additive inverse of 8, and 8 would be the additive inverse of minus 8. Let us look at a few properties of integers under addition. So first property that we will be looking at is called the closure property. So what do you mean by the closure property? So adding any two integers will always result in another integer. So for example, if we have two integers 18 and 14, adding these two integers would result in 32. So 32 is another integer. Similarly, say we add 25 and say minus 13, we would end up with 12. So 12 is another integer. So whenever we add two integers, we would always end up with another integer. So that is our first property called the closure property. Second, we have the commutative property. So what do you mean by commutative property? The order in which two integers are added will not affect the sum. So if we add 4 and 5, so if it is 4 plus 5 or whether it is 5 plus 4, they will yield the same result, which would be 9. So the order in which two integers are added will not affect the sum, and this is called the commutative property. Say we add 7 to minus 10, or whether we add minus 10 to 7, we will still end up getting minus 3. So the order in which they are added does not matter. Now in this case, note that subtraction is not commutative. What do you mean? 2 minus 4 is not the same as 4 minus 2. So subtraction is not commutative. Next, let us look at the third property, which would be the associative property. So whenever we add any three integers, the grouping does not change the result. For example, if we add 2 plus 3 and then we add 4 to it, it would be the same as adding 2 to the sum of 3 plus 4. So whether we add 2 plus 3 first and then add 4, or whether we add 3 plus 4 and then add 2, both would yield 9. So the grouping will not change the result. This is called associative property. And then finally we have additive identity. What do you mean by additive identity? So whenever we add 0 to any integer, we would get back the same integer. For example, 6 plus 0 would give me 6. Similarly, 0 plus minus 7 would give me minus 7. So whenever we add 0 to any integer, we would get back the same integer. This is the additive identity. Now let us look at multiplication of integers. So there are a few key rules for multiplying integers. Firstly, whenever we multiply two positive integers, the result would always be a positive product. For example, if you are multiplying 5 and 7, it would result in 35. So 5 and 7, both of them are positive. 35 is also positive. Similarly, if we multiply 9 and 6, we would get 54. 9 and 6 are positive. 54 is also positive. Then say we are multiplying a positive integer with a negative integer. So in this case, the product of a positive integer and a negative integer would always be negative. Say we are multiplying 3 with minus 8, we would end up getting minus 24. So positive multiplied by a negative will give me another negative. Similarly, say minus 6 multiplied by 4 would result in minus 24. Now what will happen when we multiply two negative integers? In this case, the result would always be a positive product. For example, minus 5 multiplied by minus 9 gives us 45. So whenever we multiply any two negative integers, we would get back a positive integer. Similarly, say minus 4 multiplied by minus 3 would give us 12, which is positive. Now extrapolating this further, what will happen, say if we are multiplying three negative integers? So say we have minus 2 multiplied by minus 3 multiplied by minus 4. In this case, the product of minus 2 and minus 3 would be 6 multiplied by minus 4 gives us minus 24. And now what will happen if we say multiply 4 negative integers? Say minus 1 multiplied by minus 2, minus 3 and minus 4. This would be 2 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 4, which would give us 24. So whenever we multiply three negative integers, the product would be negative, and whenever we multiply four negative integers, the product would be positive. Now from all this, we can draw a few observations. Firstly, the product of an odd number of negative integers would always be negative. Say minus 3 multiplied by minus 5 multiplied by minus 7 would give us minus 105. So we are multiplying three negative integers. So whenever we multiply an odd number of negative integers, we would get a negative result. Similarly, whenever we multiply an even number of negative integers, the result would always be positive. Say minus 2 multiplied by minus 4 multiplied by minus 6 multiplied by minus 8 would give us 384, which is positive. Thirdly, we will see that the product of any number of positive integers would always be positive. Any number of positive integers we consider, and if we multiply all of them together, the result would always be positive. Say 2 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 4 multiplied by 5 would be 6 into 21, 20, which is positive. So from all this, we have a few takeaways. So First, we have seen what we mean by an additive inverse. So opposite integers adding to 0 would be the additive integers. Then we have seen a few properties of addition, including the closure property, the commutative property, and the associative property. Then finally, we saw a few rules of multiplication. Positive multiplying by positive will lead to a positive result. Positive with a negative will give us a negative product, and negative negative will give us a positive product.